No one in Daniel Harper's life would have guessed that a simple business trip could shake his heart more than any argument ever had. From the outside, his marriage looked steady and calm, like a house built on solid ground. He and Melissa had been married for 12 years. They owned a comfortable home in a quiet neighborhood, had polite neighbors who waved every morning, and shared routines that ran smoothly like clockwork. But what no one could see was the silence that had slowly grown between them. It was not loud or angry. It was soft, polite, and cold. Daniel used to rush home from work in the early years of their marriage. He used to bring small surprises, flowers from a street vendor, her favorite chocolate, silly jokes saved on his phone. Melissa used to greet him with bright eyes and long hugs. They would talk for hours about their plans, about places they wanted to travel, about dreams that felt close enough to touch. But time had changed their rhythm. Work became heavier. Responsibilities grew. Dreams turned into schedules. Hugs became quick. Conversations became practical. Did you pay the electricity bill? What time is your meeting tomorrow? Don't forget the car service. Their words were useful, but they were not warm. Melissa had once been full of laughter. Now she smiled often, but it did not always reach her eyes. Daniel noticed it sometimes, especially at dinner, when she would stir her food quietly and look lost in thought. He would want to ask what she was thinking, but instead he would check his phone. It felt easier. Safer. He told himself this was normal. Every long marriage becomes calm. Every couple slows down. Passion fades, but comfort stays. That is what he believed. Then his company announced a 2-week conference in Seattle. It was important, full of big clients and new projects. His manager personally recommended him. It was a chance to prove himself for a promotion he had been chasing for months. When he told Melissa, she paused for only a second before nodding. "That's good," she said. "You've worked hard." Her tone was kind, but distant. He waited for something else, maybe sadness, maybe excitement, but nothing came. She simply went back to folding laundry. The night before he left, they packed his suitcase together. She rolled his shirts carefully. He checked his laptop charger twice. They moved around each other like polite roommates. When they went to bed, there was space between them. Not large, but noticeable. Daniel lay awake longer than usual. He tried to remember the last time they had stayed up just talking, without looking at the clock. He could not remember. The morning of his flight, Melissa drove him to the airport. Traffic was slow. The radio played soft music in the background. They made small talk about the weather and his schedule. When they reached the drop-off point, Daniel stepped out of the car and leaned in to hug her. She hugged him back, gentle and quick. "Call me when you land," she said. He nodded. As he walked toward the entrance, he felt something strange, not sadness, not excitement. Something empty. The plane ride felt longer than usual. Daniel watched clouds stretch across the sky and wondered why his chest felt lighter the farther he traveled from home. He should have felt guilt for that thought, but instead he felt relief. It scared him a little. Was he running away from something? Or had he already been distant long before this flight? Seattle welcomed him with cool air and light rain. The city looked alive and fresh. The streets shone under soft gray skies. His hotel stood near the water, tall and modern, with wide glass windows that faced the harbor. When he entered his room, he dropped his suitcase and walked straight to the window. Boats moved slowly across the water. People walked under umbrellas. It felt different from his quiet suburb. It felt awake. That evening, Daniel ordered room service and sat alone at a small table. No television. No background noise. Just him and the rain tapping against the glass. He checked his phone. One message from Melissa: "Hope the flight was okay." He typed back quickly: "Landed safely. Hotel is nice." He stared at the screen after sending it, expecting more words to come from her. They didn't. He placed the phone face down. The next morning, the conference began. The hotel ballroom buzzed with energy. People from different cities shook hands, exchanged business cards, laughed loudly. Daniel felt alert, focused. He liked this version of himself, the professional, confident man who spoke clearly and listened carefully. During a morning session about new market strategies, he raised his hand and shared an idea. A woman across the table challenged his point with a thoughtful question. Her name was Ava Thompson. She had sharp eyes and calm confidence. She did not try too hard to impress anyone. She simply spoke with honesty. After the session ended, she approached him near the coffee station. "I liked your idea," she said, holding a paper cup. "But I think it needs a stronger digital angle." Her tone was direct, but not rude. Daniel smiled. "Maybe you're right." They stood there longer than expected, discussing ideas. Their conversation flowed easily, moving from work to small personal details. She mentioned she had moved to Seattle after her divorce. He mentioned he had been married for over a decade. There was no tension in that moment, just connection. Real conversation. The day passed quickly. During lunch, Daniel noticed himself scanning the room for Ava without meaning to. She was across the table laughing with colleagues. He felt a small pull in his chest. It was subtle, but new. He hadn't felt that spark in years. That night, back in his room, he replayed their conversations. It wasn't about her beauty, though she was attractive in a quiet way. It was about how she listened. How she asked questions. How she looked at him like his thoughts mattered. When was the last time someone looked at him that way? Melissa used to. The thought hit him suddenly. Melissa had once been curious about everything he said. She used to sit close and ask about his dreams. But when had he stopped sharing them? When had he started giving short answers instead of full stories? The next day, Daniel and Ava were assigned to the same workshop group. They worked side by side, brainstorming strategies. Their shoulders almost touched at the table. Every now and then, their eyes met and held for a second too long. It was not dramatic. It was quiet electricity. During a short break, they walked outside to get fresh air. The rain had stopped. The city smelled clean. "You seem thoughtful," Ava said as they stood near the waterfront, just thinking about life. Daniel replied, "That sounds serious," she teased lightly. He shrugged. "Maybe it is." She looked at him carefully, as if trying to read what he wasn't saying. He felt exposed and understood at the same time. That evening, instead of eating alone, Daniel joined a small group for dinner. Ava sat across from him. The restaurant was warm and full of light. Conversations blended together. At one point, she told a story about starting over after her divorce. "It's scary," she said. "But sometimes you don't realize how lonely you were until you leave." Her words settled deep inside him. Lonely. That was the word he had avoided. Was he lonely in his marriage? Or had he made Melissa lonely too? Back in his hotel room later, Daniel stood in front of the mirror. He looked the same, neatly dressed, professional, composed. But inside, something was shifting. He realized he had not felt this awake in years. Not because of the city. Not because of the conference. Because someone new had seen him differently. His phone buzzed. A message from Melissa. "Everything okay? You seem quiet today." He stared at the screen. He typed, "Busy schedule." "All good." Then he stopped. He deleted it. He typed again, "Yeah, just tired." He sent it before he could think more. He sat on the edge of the bed and felt a mix of guilt and excitement. Nothing had happened. No lines had been crossed. But emotions had started moving in directions he could not ignore. He walked back to the window. The city lights reflected on the water like scattered stars. He pressed his hand against the cool glass and asked himself a question he had avoided for years. When had he stopped fighting for his own marriage? He did not have the answer. All he knew was that this trip, meant to be about business, had opened a door inside him. A door that led to feelings he thought were long gone, and he was not sure whether he wanted to close it. By the fourth day of the conference, Daniel no longer told himself that Ava was just another colleague. Their conversations had moved beyond market plans and business goals. They now spoke during breakfast before sessions started. They walked together between conference halls. They shared quiet jokes that no one else understood. It felt natural, easy, and dangerous at the same time. That morning, Seattle was bright for the first time all week. Sunlight touched the water, and the city looked softer. Daniel arrived early to review his presentation slides, but he found himself distracted. His mind replayed Ava's laugh from the night before. It had stayed with him longer than it should have. When she entered the room, she waved casually and sat beside him without hesitation. "Ready to impress everyone?" she asked. He smiled. "I'll try." During his presentation, Daniel felt her eyes on him. Not judging, not analyzing, supporting. When he finished, she was the first to clap. A simple gesture, yet it filled him with pride. He had not realized how much he missed being seen. Later that afternoon, they were assigned to prepare a joint proposal for a new project. It required long hours in a smaller meeting room with glass walls. Papers covered the table. Laptops glowed in front of them. As they worked, their conversation slipped easily between professional and personal topics. "Do you ever think about how different life could have been?" Ava asked while reviewing numbers. "All the time," Daniel admitted. She looked at him, waiting. "I used to think my life would feel bigger," he said quietly. "Not in money or success. Just fuller." Ava nodded slowly. "Sometimes we settle into comfort and forget what passion feels like." Her words did not accuse him. They simply existed in the space between them. Daniel felt a tightness in his chest. Passion. That word had once defined his marriage. Now it felt like something distant. They worked until evening. When the meeting ended, most people left in groups. Ava lingered near the door. "There's a small cafe near the pier," she said. "It's quiet. Good place to clear your head." He hesitated for only a second. "Okay." The cafe was warm and softly lit. The smell of coffee mixed with the scent of the ocean drifting in from outside. They chose a table by the window. For a while, They spoke about safe topics, music, travel, books. But slowly, the conversation deepened. Ava told him about her marriage. How it had started with strong love and ended with silent distance. We stopped talking about real things, she said. We became polite strangers sharing a house. Daniel felt as if she had described his own life. Why didn't you try to fix it? He asked gently. We tried, she replied. But sometimes both people have already stepped back emotionally. By the time you notice, you're too far apart. Her honesty unsettled him. He imagined Melissa sitting alone at their kitchen table. He imagined her thinking he had already stepped back. Had he? The cafe grew quieter as the night went on. Their knees brushed under the table once. Neither moved away quickly. The touch was small, but it carried weight. Daniel felt heat rise to his face. He looked down at his cup. This feels complicated, he said finally. Ava did not pretend not to understand. It is. Silence followed, but it was not uncomfortable. It was heavy with awareness. When they stepped outside, the sky had turned dark blue. Streetlights reflected on wet pavement. A soft breeze moved through the air. They stood close, not touching, yet aware of every inch between them. You should go, Ava said quietly. He nodded. Yeah. But neither moved. For a brief second, Daniel imagined what it would feel like to close the distance. To forget responsibility. To choose excitement over loyalty. The thought flashed through him fast and bright, then his phone buzzed. Melissa's name lit up the screen. He stepped back instinctively and answered. Her voice sounded small but steady. Hey. Just wanted to hear you. He glanced at Ava, who looked away politely. Hi, he said, trying to sound normal. They spoke for a few minutes about nothing important. Yet the call felt heavier than usual. Melissa asked about his meetings. He answered briefly. Before hanging up, she paused. I miss you, she said softly. The words struck him harder than he expected. I'll be home soon, he replied. After the call ended, he stood still. Ava watched him carefully. She misses you, she said. Yes. And do you miss her? The question cut deeper than any accusation. Daniel opened his mouth but could not answer right away. Did he miss Melissa? Or did he miss the version of them they used to be? I don't know what I feel, he admitted. Ava stepped back slightly, creating space. Then figure it out, she said gently. Before you hurt someone. They walked back toward the hotel in silence. When they reached the entrance, she stopped. I don't want to be someone's escape, she added. He respected her for that. It made everything harder. That night in his room, Daniel could not sleep. He replayed every moment of the week. The laughter. The glances. The comfort he felt with Ava. Then he thought about Melissa's voice on the phone. He pictured her sitting on their bed alone. He realized something painful. He had not been fully present in his marriage for a long time. He had blamed routine, stress, exhaustion. But he had also stopped trying. He had chosen comfort over effort. The next morning, tension followed him. During meetings, he struggled to focus. When Ava spoke to him, her tone remained warm but careful. The ease between them had shifted into awareness. During lunch, she sat across from him again. You look like you didn't sleep, she observed. I didn't, he admitted. Daniel, she said softly, what are you really looking for? He thought about it honestly. Was he searching for love? For validation? For excitement? Or was he simply trying to escape responsibility? I want to feel alive, he said. She smiled sadly. Feeling alive shouldn't mean destroying something stable. Her words were not dramatic. They were calm and real. That afternoon, they finalized their proposal. Their teamwork remained strong, but there was distance in their body language. Both understood the line they were approaching. Neither wanted to cross it without clarity. As the day ended, a closing dinner was announced for the following night. Music, drinks, celebration. Daniel knew it would be another test. When he returned to his room, he did not sit by the window this time. Instead, he picked up his phone and opened old photos of Melissa. Vacations by the beach. Birthday parties. Random selfies in the kitchen. In those images, their eyes held warmth. He realized he had been measuring his marriage by its current silence, not by its history of effort. The next evening at the closing dinner, the atmosphere was lively. Lights were dim. People laughed loudly. Glasses clinked. Ava looked beautiful in a simple dark dress. Daniel felt the familiar pull again, strong and immediate. They danced once, briefly, with others around them. Their hands touched. Electricity moved through him. For a second, the world blurred, then he remembered Melissa's voice. I miss you. He stepped back. Ava saw the shift instantly. You made a decision, she said quietly over the music. Yes, he answered, and? I need to fix my own house before I look anywhere else. There was no anger in her eyes. Only understanding. That's the right choice, she replied. They stood facing each other for a moment that could have turned into something else. But it didn't. Later, as Daniel packed his suitcase, he felt heavy but clear. The temptation had been real. The attraction had been real. But so was his responsibility. This trip had shown him what was missing in his life. Not a new woman. Not a new city, effort. As he zipped his bag closed, he knew the hardest part was still ahead. Going home would not magically repair everything. It would require honesty. It would require uncomfortable conversations. It would require admitting that he had drifted, but for the first time in years, Daniel felt awake not because of excitement, but because of truth, and truth, he realized, was the only way forward. Daniel Harper's flight back home was quiet. He sat by the window, watching clouds stretch like white oceans across the sky, thinking about Melissa. He remembered her voice from the phone, soft and longing. He thought about the empty space at home, about the nights they spent side by side but not together. The business trip had changed something inside him, awakened feelings he hadn't realized were asleep. But now, returning home, he knew the real work was just beginning. When he walked through the front door, the house felt familiar yet different. It smelled like Melissa had cleaned and cooked, soft lavender mixed with the faint scent of dinner still on the stove. She was there, standing in the living room, waiting. Her hair was tied back loosely, sweater soft against her skin, eyes blinking as if she hadn't expected him to arrive so soon. For a moment, Daniel paused. He studied her. Not the routine Melissa he had grown used to. Not the background of his life. But Melissa, the woman who had chosen him years ago and still stood there, quietly, waiting. She smiled softly. "You're back," she said, almost as if testing the sound of her own words. He wanted to reach out, to hug her, to say everything at once, but he held himself back. Instead, he set down his suitcase, lingering with a glance before moving into the kitchen. Melissa followed him, and they both stood there, the silence heavy but not uncomfortable. Daniel noticed the tiredness in her eyes. Life hadn't paused while he was away. Responsibilities, work, and quiet loneliness had been her companions. He felt a sudden wave of guilt. That evening, instead of turning on the television or scrolling through his phone, Daniel pulled up a chair at the kitchen table. He looked at Melissa across from him. There were no words at first, just the sound of the refrigerator humming and the faint ticking of the wall clock. He finally spoke, voice low and deliberate. "We need to talk." Melissa's shoulders stiffened slightly, but she didn't move away. "Is everything okay?" she asked, voice calm but wary. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've realized a lot these past 2 weeks. About myself, about us." Melissa nodded, a small flicker of curiosity or fear crossing her face. She waited. Daniel took a deep breath. He told her about the trip, about the long days and conversations that had awakened something in him. He didn't describe every detail, didn't talk about every moment with Ava, but he was honest about his feelings. About the temptation he had felt. About the recognition that he had been emotionally distant, that he had stopped trying. Melissa listened quietly. No interruptions. No tears yet. Just listening. Daniel could see her mind turning, working through the words. When he finally stopped, the room was still. Melissa's voice broke the silence. "I felt it too," she admitted softly. "I felt the distance. I wondered if you even saw me anymore." Her confession hit him harder than any warning could. It wasn't anger. It wasn't blame. It was honesty. And it hurt because it was true. Daniel moved closer. "I do see you," he said firmly. "I love you. I always have. But love alone isn't enough if we stop choosing each other every day." She blinked at him, and for the first time in a long while, he saw something soft, hopeful, alive, in her eyes. "Choosing each other," she whispered. "That sounds so simple, but it feels impossible sometimes." "It's not simple," he admitted. "But we can't expect love to last if we don't put effort in. I want to try. Really try." The next hours were quiet but full. They spoke about moments of resentment, about the small distances that had grown unnoticed. They spoke about missed opportunities to connect, about nights when they slept side by side yet felt worlds apart. There were tears, his and hers, but they were tempered with a growing understanding. They didn't rush, didn't pretend to solve everything immediately. They simply began to speak and listen, to remember what it felt like to really be together. In the days that followed, Daniel changed small things at first. He canceled late meetings. He made time for shared dinners. He began leaving small notes for Melissa, simple messages to show he was thinking of her, remembering her, choosing her. Melissa responded in kind, with gestures of her own, coffee waiting on the counter, a hand held briefly while passing in the hallway, a smile that reached her eyes. They started walking together in the evenings, rediscovering the rhythm of their companionship. They spoke about their past, laughed about old memories, and dreamed cautiously about the future. It was not perfect. There were moments of awkwardness, moments where old resentments surfaced. But each time, they faced it together, rather than drifting apart. They even began counseling. Not because they were broken beyond repair, but because they had realized that love alone cannot fix distance. Words, effort, and understanding were necessary. And they were willing to invest in all three. Weeks turned into months. Each day, Daniel noticed small changes in both himself and Melissa. He saw her laughter return more often. He heard her voice sing softly in the kitchen as she cooked. He noticed the spark in her eyes when she caught him watching her, not out of obligation, but out of desire. One evening, months after his return, Daniel found himself standing in the kitchen with music playing softly. Melissa laughed as he attempted to dance badly, deliberately offbeat. He twirled awkwardly, knocking into a chair, and she laughed so hard it echoed through the house. The sound filled him with warmth, with relief. The house no longer felt quiet in the way that had once made him restless. It felt alive, full, connected. Daniel reflected on the business trip that had almost led him down a different path. It had opened doors, shown him how easily one could drift, how simple it was to confuse excitement with connection. Yet it had also reminded him of what truly mattered, the person who had built a life with him, the shared history, the love that required effort to keep alive. He realized that love was not merely about comfort, nor about avoiding temptation, nor about fleeting passion. Love was about showing up, choosing each other again and again, even when the world was busy, even when distance threatened, even when mistakes had been made. The journey was not over. Challenges would arise, temptations would return in different forms, and old habits could resurface. But for the first time in years, Daniel felt certain of one thing: he would face each challenge with intention. He would act with awareness. He would choose Melissa, and they would choose each other, daily, courageously, honestly. That night, as they sat together in the living room, talking quietly, planning future trips, dreaming about things they had postponed, Daniel felt a profound sense of peace. Not because the trip was over. Not because temptation had disappeared. But because truth had returned. And truth, he knew, was the foundation for lasting love. He looked at Melissa, and she looked at him, and in that silent gaze, there was forgiveness, understanding, and hope. Their hands found each other on the armrest, fingers intertwining naturally. They did not speak. Words were unnecessary. They had remembered what it meant to be a team, to be partners, to be more than two people sharing a space. They were a couple choosing connection, even when it required courage. The business trip had nearly changed everything. It had nearly made Daniel question his priorities, his loyalty, his heart. But it had also awakened clarity. It had shown him the fragility of love, yes, but also its resilience. They had been tested, tempted, and challenged. And now, after weeks of reflection, honest conversation, and small but meaningful actions, they were rebuilding something stronger. Love, Daniel realized, was not a feeling that lasts on its own. It was a series of choices, repeated, deliberate, and sometimes difficult. But when those choices were made with intention, love became more than a word or a memory. It became a life fully shared, a heart fully committed. And in that quiet home, filled with the warmth of shared laughter and reclaimed trust, Daniel finally understood that choosing Melissa every day was the adventure he had been searching for all along. He smiled, she smiled, and for the first time in a long while, the future looked bright, open, and promising. The trip had changed him, yes, but returning home had changed everything that truly mattered.